Chrissy, can you tell me when my 15, well, I'm going to speak for 10 minutes. Can you tell me when I've got maybe 2 minutes left? Just give me. Yeah. 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 So I'm introducing myself, and then I'll introduce you, and then I'll introduce Safua and Anaka. Tēnā ra koutou. E mihi kawana kia koutou e whakarongo mai, e mātakitiki mai ana I tēnei kōrero I tēnei wā, nō reira tēnā koutou. Our dear colleagues and friends that are watching online this presentation, Te Papa is very happy to present the connections that we have with the Übersee Museum in Germany and the undertakings that we have done to connect both Oceania taonga artifacts and also kōiwi tangata and kōiwi chakat, Māori and Māori ancestral remains with their communities of origin. So tēnā ra koutou, my name is Te Hereke Ki Herewini. I'm the head of repatriation and I'm happy to present today. And so one of the first things I do want to do is acknowledge the passing of Kingi Heitia and also a very dear kuia of the Wanganui River called Nani Piki Waretini. They are part of that movement in the 1980s. Well, Kingi Heitia's mother was Te Ariki Nui, Te Tairangi Kahu. She was very pivotal in the early repatriation movement within Aotearoa, New Zealand. And this is our particular motto of the Karanga Aotearoa Repatriation Program. Tukuna mai e kapunga one one hei tangi. Provide me with a handful of soil from my homeland so I may feel the warmth of my ancestors and weep. Part of my presentation today is about the eternal connection that Māori and Moriori have with their ancestors, even though they departed as part of the trade, looting, and collection of ancestral remains from Aotearoa, but also from the wider Pacific that went to Europe. So that's very important history to acknowledge, but also the other element is the work that communities of origin have done to repatriate their ancestors. My very brief kōrero or presentation today will have two case studies, but I also will talk about our ancient ancestors over 3,000 years ago called Tāwhaki and Karihi, and the concepts of tapue noa, the repatriation of Māori and Moriori ancestral remains, and two particular case studies of belonging to Tainui Waikato or the Kingitanga, and also the tribes from the Awatupua, the Wanganui River. So let me start with ancient story over 3,000 years ago. So before Māori were in a very cold place called Aotearoa, New Zealand, their ancestors were in tropical Polynesia. Some people say that our homeland is in the Cook Islands or French Polynesia or beyond. And so many of our traditional stories connect to certain islands in those groups. One of the ancient stories that we do have that is around 3,000 years old is that pertaining to two ancestors, one called Tāwhaki and one called Karihi. So they were brothers. And unfortunately, their island home was ransacked by a group of people called the Ponaturi. And the Ponaturi took their mother and father. They killed the father and they put his bones and took the father's bones back to their island and hung them in one of their wharenui, great houses. And the mother became a slave to the Ponaturi. And so the responsibility of Tāwhaki and Karihi was to find their parents and to rescue them and to bring them home. And so in one of the dreams of Tāwhaki, he could hear the rattling of his father's bones. And so that for him was instigated his quest to actually not only find the bones, to rescue the koiwi, his father, to rescue his mother, but also part of our tradition is that they actually have to find utu, or balance what harm had happened to their family against the family that had imposed the harm onto them. And so that is our ancient tradition that comes from tropical Polynesia, and that we have incorporated into Māori customary practice to this very day, except we don't take utu on people anymore. Part of our repatriation is actually to have our ancestors repatriated so that we recognise their tapu, their sacredness, their mana, their personal power and prestige, and that they be reunited with their families of origin with both their tapu and mana intact. The trading of Māori and Moriori ancestral remains began before the treaty was signed, and that's when the mummified heads were traded. Some of those people that traded were rangatira or chiefs of different tribal groups around the country, but the majority of ancestors left after the signing of the treaty. And so that was from 1840 when the British Crown established themselves, their government in these islands. And that's when museums were established within our country. And so Sir James Hector, who was in the photograph, he was one of the directors of the Wellington Colonial Museum from the 1860s. And so through many of the directors, our ancestors were uplifted from their wahi tapu, their sacred repositories around the country. They were looted, they were collected, and they were traded within institutions within our own country, and also about over 1,000 of the ancestors were traded overseas. So those ancestors went to museums in Australia, North America, South America, and Europe. And some ended up in Bremen in Germany. And so that is a common story with indigenous remains around the world, is that they have been uplifted, collected, traded, looted, and traded for commercial profit and value. The person I want to refer to is Te Ariki Nui Te Ātairangi Kahu. So that's the mother of the late Kingi Tuheitia. And she was important from the 1970s to the 1980s, when her tribal group, Tainui and Waikato, sought the return of one of their ancestors that had been taken by a collector called Reischek. And so, although Reischek was from Austria is a German-speaking country, but it wasn't Germany. But a lot of Māori ancestors did go into Austria, and then they were traded beyond into other parts of German-speaking countries. So two of the ancestors that were taken by Reischek, one was called Tūpaho, that was a high chief of the Tainui people, and also his mokopuna, or the mummified remains of his grandchild. And so Reischek didn't have permission to take these ancestral remains, but they were taken, and over 50 ancestors under Reischek's collection were traded to Austria. And they remained there until the Māori Queen and her representatives started to seek the return of them in the 1970s. It only became successful for them to come back when around the 1985, there was an agreement between the Austrian government and the New Zealand government for those ancestors to return. And so that was only one ancestor at that time, but in 2016, I think there was another ancestor that came back, and more recently, there's been over 50 ancestors from Austria that have returned home. So once again, the purpose of bringing our ancestors home is to reconnect their tapu and their mana and their Māori with their homelands, so that we remember them and they reconnect with their communities of origin. The other ancestor I want to recognise is Pohepate Umuroa, who was a chief from the Wanganui River, who was incarcerated in Tasmania in the 1840s. So The colonial government in New Zealand at the time thought that he was a rebel, so they incarcerated him and took him overseas. Unfortunately, he died in Tasmania and was buried there. And so his memory was lost until the 1980s again, when the Wanganui tribal group sought his return. And after many discussions with the Australian government and representatives from the Aboriginal community in Tasmania, Pohepa Te Umuro also returned. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the changing ethics and changing attitudes towards repatriation. So for Karanga Aotearoa, what I have noticed is that the changes that historically Indigenous ancestral remains have been seen as scientific specimens for overseas institutions. So their humanity has been lost. But part of our work to seek the return of our ancestors is to return their humanity to their remains, to their bones, and to reconnect their tapu and their mana and their mauri to them once again. So ultimately, that is something that we are taught as young people within our own family and tribal groups. And every week, if a family member dies, it's our responsibility as those family members to uplift them and bring them home. So repatriation, from my perspective, although it is international, it is something that is entrenched in our tradition that is over 3,000 years old, going back to Tāwhaki and Kārehe. Nō reira, that is my presentation. So tēnā koutou. And I do want to introduce our next presenter, Professor Dr. Wiebke Arndt, Director of the Übersee Museum, Bremen, Germany. Professor Arndt has a distinguished museology background and career stemming from 1999 and has a special interest in cultures and communities belonging to the Mesoamerica. Professor Dr. Arndt has been the director of the Übersee Museum since 2002, which has an extensive collection of taonga, cultural treasures originating from Oceania, including those of Pacifica, Māori, and Moriori origin, and will reopen a major Oceania exhibition that celebrates both cultural treasures and communities belonging to Oceania in early 2025. Ms. Arndt is the president of the German Museum Association and has worked with the association to implement guidelines that highlight the importance of repatriation to Indigenous communities and peoples. In 2017, the Übersee Museum and Te Papa worked in partnership to repatriate Māori and Moriori ancestral remains, and more recently, the museum has held online wānanga seminars regarding Samoan and Moriori cultural treasures with their respective communities. I invite you to the podium.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, wherever in the world you are listening to this presentation, thank you very much that I was offered to give this presentation today on the work of the Übersee Museum Bremen in Germany in regard to our Oceania collections. Putting together this presentation, we realized that we are really focusing on our Pacific collections now for quite some time, which ends up in a presentation where I would like to give an overview on what we are doing and have a strong focus then, of course, on the upcoming exhibitions. Please excuse that I only can spotlight most of the topics I mentioned. If you are deeply interested in, you will find more information on our website. And of course, feel free to ask in the Q&A, which will come after the third presentation. Since Dr. Herevini started talking about repatriation, I want to start my presentation also with this very important topic. It was already mentioned that we returned ancestor remains of Moriori and Maori origin here to Aotearoa, New Zealand. First starting in 2006 with Toimoko, which were handed over here in the Te Papa. And then in 2017, we had an important handover ceremony, which was public in Bremen in the Übersee Museum, and which everybody who participated in will never forget in a lifetime. It was for us a very touching, very important moment that we were able to repatriate all ancestor remains from New Zealand stored in our museum, which were brought there by my predecessor, the founding director of what's now the Übersee Museum. He took them here in New Zealand illegally and unethically, and it was important for us that it was possible to joint research we had together before, and that we could do this repatriation. The next two restitutions were to Hawaii, 10 Ibikupuna in 2020 and in 2023, with a delegation from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, also a very important occasion taking place at the Übersee Museum. And just a couple of weeks ago, we restituted a proa to the independent state of Samoa. This proa belonged originally to a war canoe, which was captured by a German admiral back in the 1880s on the shores of Samoa. In his diary, he admired how beautifully made this canoe was. And on the next day, he chopped it into pieces to make it into firewood. And just this proa, he sent to Germany and gave it in the 1930s to the Übersee Museum. It was due to a joint provenance research of our provenance researcher, Bettina von Briscon, and an historian working at the National University of Samoa, Dr. Brian Ailufai-Tuli, that we were able to reconstruct this complete story, and finally were able to return this piece to Samoa in July of this year. You already realized that all these repatriations were based and were actually only possible on the basis, on the ground of joint provenance research. And therefore, I would like to spotlight two projects we had in the past years, which are very important to us and in regard to our collection, and I guess also for the people we are working with. One is on ancestral and toffee skulls from former German New Guinea. We house 130 of these skulls in our collection. This is quite a substantial number. But you have to know that most European museums have these ancestral and toffee skulls from New Guinea in their collections as artistic artworks. They're beautifully made, overformed skulls. But the question is what happened that all these ancestral remains found the way to European museums? Because there are so many of them who traveled involuntarily, probably, but nobody knows. So we said we have to start this project. It was funded by the German Lost Art Foundation. This is an important foundation in Germany fostering provenance research, now also on the colonial period. And we did this project together with partners in New Ireland, and it has three major scopes. One is historical research. The documentation in our files is very scarce. So we really thought it's important to really go into archival material to figure out whatever is possible on these collections. Then we had field research done by our partners in New Ireland, who interviewed elders in the villages of New Ireland to find out whatever they can on the provenance of these skulls. And we had CD scans made to get more biological data on the people involved, also to try to do our share in rehumanizing the ancestral remains. Over these years, we got to know our partners in New Ireland very well and developed together another project where they were very much interested in, was on our ethnographic collection from New Ireland, which consists of more than 700 pieces. We created a project called Ethnographic Collecting in Neumecklenburg, as it was called in the former German colonial period, and did this joint research together. It's actually almost finished. And now the final reports are being written. It was possible that our partners could come to Bremen for several weeks to work in the collection, to discuss, to do research on that. And we decided that we focus on those objects where we find an impact of colonial conflict in the region in the time of collecting. As another important step, you see on the right hand with base, now both are wearing base caps. In the middle is Adam Camiel, and to the right it's Tony Lupai. And Tony Lupai now is hosting a Facebook page called Bilas Peles in Bremen, where he on a quite regular basis is posting parts of the collection, inviting people to comment and to give information on the provenance research. The idea behind that is that we wanted to get out of the academic bubble with our provenance research. We wanted to reach out to just regular people, to communities in the villages in New Ireland. And since in the Pacific, many, many people are using Facebook, this was our way to start a communication and to see what is coming back. And you see the numbers of followers are slowly and steadily growing, which makes us very happy because we started from very basic posting one object and seeing what's going to happen. These are already corporations we are talking about. So I'm right away at my next chapter, focusing on what are we doing as corporations with Pacific Islanders in the past years. First to mention is our collaboration with the Hokotei Moriori Trust, which I feel very, very thankful for, because I never would have expected that this cooperation would be possible, knowing that our funding director took all these Moriori ancestral remains from a funeral place in Chatham, on the Chatham Islands to Bremen, which were then returned in 2017. And I'm very happy, very honored about this cooperation. As Dr. Herivini already mentioned, we had an online workshop in 2023 with people. It was organized by the Hokotei Moriori Trust, and we were talking about the miheke in our collection. These tools were also collected by our founding director, taken from the Chatham Islands to Bremen by the end of the 19th century, together with the ancestral remains. And the focus of this discussions we have at the moment is that we are creating a showcase in our upcoming exhibitions on the corporations we have. And we are discussing how are we going to display a part of this miheke, and also the work of the Moriori Trust here in New Zealand. The other cooperation is consisting of several parts. It's with the National University of Samoa. And actually, it somehow started in 2018 when I had the pleasure to meet Dr. Safua Amana Akali at a conference in Hamburg when we were working on the already mentioned guidelines on the care of colonial collections. And Dr. Amana Akali was invited as one of the international experts by the German Museum Association to discuss our draft paper and to enhance it also with her own ideas. And we were sitting one evening together and discussed the ideas we had so far for our upcoming exhibition in Bremen. It was just a sketch of a page. And we both found, well, it works, it could work. So it needed some time, as always, to find funding, but we were able to start the collaboration with the National University of Samoa in 2020 as part of an online digital project and funded by the Foreign Office of the Federal Republic of Germany. The cooperation consists of several parts. One section is with the Faculty of Environmental Science, where we focus on public engagement and knowledge exchange. And we use the way of citizen science to generate baseline data on Samoan freshwater resources on the, for Samoa, very important Baisano River. With a lot of students, you see them here walking in the river. We established a specimen collection at the NUS. We shared our experiences and our expertise, and we worked with the NUS on the possibilities on digitizing their collection of specimens housed at the NUS. On the other hand, we are working together with the Center of Samoan Studies, and at the first step, we were looking together with the former director of the Center of Samoan Studies, Malama Melisea, to hire 2 team members coming to Bremen to join our team in Bremen to work on this, our Oceanian project. And you see here our co-curator, Mitjana Abon, and our scientific intern, Anga Nialunga Schmidt, who came for quite some time to Bremen to develop our projects with us together. Mitjana Abon, as a first step, created a Facebook page. That was actually before we started with the New Island project, so we already had a positive reaction to that and thought, well, we can transport this idea to other projects as well. He called it Oceania Collection Voyages, focused at the beginning slowly on the Samoan collections, put them online, slowly one by one with archival information, with whatever we know, to really increase awareness and engagement of Samoans, and also in the villages, not just the bubble at the NUS. And this was so successful that we, in a further step, started to broaden that with to other Pacific regions. So slowly we are bringing, making public our Pacific collections via Facebook. What actually had its roots in the COVID pandemic, because it was originally the idea that there were a lot more traveling back and forth between Bremen and Samoa, which couldn't take place. We developed something which I'm actually very happy that we were forced to develop this, because it's quite innovative and it works very well. We called it Measina Show and Tell. Measina is the Samoan word for treasures. And what we developed is the idea to invite people in other countries to join us going to our storage facilities in Bremen by using an iPad. And people are sitting at their computers. That was with the members of the Moriori Trust. Or in Samoa, the community members were sitting in the seminar room at the NUS and directed, you see a person standing to the right with the iPad, directed our curator to the objects and say, I'm interested in this piece or in that piece. Can you get closer? I really would like to see how this siapo is made. Closer, 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 please. And the good thing with these tablets is that the cameras are so good nowadays that it's so sharp what you see. And it helped to breaking down the geographical barriers we often, community members often face in getting to know what's lying in European museums. So this is something which we started slowly to export, and I tell it to my colleagues in the other European museums as well, and say, take this idea if you would like to engage with community members in other places of the world. It's a wonderful possibility if you don't have the possibility to travel. With the NUS, we had 6 online workshops on 6 different kinds of collections. And actually these sessions laid the groundwork for a joint exhibition we developed together. And in preparation, I had workshops when I was at the NUS, but also a delegation from the Center of Samoan Studies could come to Bremen and discuss exhibition making in our museum, look at the collections, decide upon loans which could go to Apia. We gave helping hand in how to construct showcases which fulfill all the requirements which showcases for museums should have, and developed an exhibition which had an opening just last Friday. So I'm here on my way back from Samoa. We had the exhibition opening on Samoan material culture. You see here just two photos of the exhibition. We're presenting there some loans from the Übersee Museum, which date back from the 19th century. And one of the showcase in the front, you see the proa we restituted. We are also presenting replica artworks, archival material. And on the left photo, you see reproductions of our beautiful Siapo collection, which is so fragile that it can't travel anymore, but we were able to make photographs. And they made these one-to-one size reproductions in Samoa. And the colors are really astonishing. It was wonderful to see at the exhibition opening how people reacted to that. The National University of Samoa decided that this is not only one exhibition being shown there for 3 years, but it is the inaugural exhibition for a new NUS Research Museum, which opened now on August 30th this year. All this, what we have done with the National University, is going into our Oceania projects we are realizing at the moment, and Dr. Herevini already mentioned. These projects consist actually on two parts. One is, both are called the Blue Continent. They belong to each other. They are sisters, as we say that. One is a platform for dialogue, perspectives, and insights of the Pacific Islands. Will have its launch on October 10th. You see here already the QR code, so if you would like to peek to the version which is online, but you have to keep in mind that we are still working on that to really get it ready until October 10th, but we are testing at the moment. And it's the other way around as it's normal in museums. Normally you create an exhibition in a physical space, and then you create a virtual exhibition out of that, or some sort of virtual representation. This time we did it the other way around. We started with the development of the platform. We started with a lot of dialogues and conversations and research and all these, and then started with a permanent exhibition going alongside like that. So what you really see on this platform is a digital journey, which is, it started before the permanent exhibition, and then it always goes in little steps back and forth with each other. It is a utilization of collaborations, different digital tools and online platforms to start dialogue. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry. Thought I was too far. No. But actually, how to describe a digital journey. What we wanted to do is we wanted to share the people, what we experienced in the museum, the people we had the pleasure to meet, the experience we made, the informations we gathered, things we learned, all these different things which enhanced our work, which made really a change to the Übersee Museum curatorial stuff. It changed our perspective on the Pacific. It changed our way to work. It changed our way to approach people, to start dialogues with each other. It's helped a lot. So it is a story of a museum, what we have experienced. It's a platform that brings all this together. Always the question is, who is telling the story? Obviously, this platform is curated by the museum, but it's told from the perspective of the people we have worked with. We commissioned articles, interviews, artworks, and more. And some of these artworks even found their way into the physical space out of the digital world. And that's why I'm focusing now on. Sorry. It's a new permanent exhibition, the Blue Continent, Islands in the Pacific, which will be opened by the end of March next year. It's something new for the Übersee Museum. The Übersee Museum has about 10,000 square meters of exhibition space. It's two atriums, which are 17-meter high with a glass roof. And the gallery we are talking here about is about 2,000 square meters. It is the first gallery you enter from the entrance hall. So it's the first thing you discover, you experience when you enter the museum. And we wanted to create something different. So when you come into the space, you have over your head models of fish in original size, a manta, a whale shark, a dolphin, some tuna. And you can sit in a cafeteria space below. You can bring your own picnic or read a newspaper. You can lay down on a bench and look to the fish's belly. And if you continue walking through, you're approaching a huge island. This is a rendering from the design company from London, Castlemaine. It looks a bit different as it is here in this rendering. It will be a resemblance of a Palawan rock island. It is about 8 meters high with a lot of plants on it, palm trees on top, so make it even higher. Surrounded by showcases, surrounded by a 10-meter high Haraiga mask, and digital waterfall. You even can go into the island and sit inside. It will be created like a bird's nest with some sun filtering in and some beanbags. You can sit there and linger. Follow your dreams and ideas, and maybe also just read your emails. So we really would like to invite the people to spend a lot of time in our museum. They already do. We want to invite them to experience it differently. We have a lot of interactivity, so that especially we have a lot of families coming. There are a lot of things to experience, which then always are explained in a museum style. We have possibility to experience how it is to chase tuna away just by the movement of your body, or you can use a surfboard and surf a Hawaiian digital wave. What we want to do is we want to create positive emotions. We would like to establish positive connections. We would like to raise curiosity, and we would like to invite the visitors to change perspective. And that's why we worked with a lot of Pacific Islanders together. So the visitors have also the possibility to listen to them, to watch them, to get a better idea on what it is to live in the Pacific Islands. The exhibition itself consists of two major topics. First, the atrium, the center, is focused on diversity. Then we have identity, colonialism, the sustainable use of resources, and climate change. For that, it's important to know that the Übersee Museum has an ethnographic collection, but it's also a natural history museum and has a special focus on trade history, which is quite unusual. So just highlighting a few of these topics. Can't get to all of them, and I'm still talking when the sun goes down. So what we wanted to do in this diversity section, which is focused on cultural and biological diversity, we wanted to show first the diversity of perspectives. So we invited colleagues from the Pacific to choose an object of they wanted most, interested most in our collection, and to explain it to our visitors in their mother tongue and in English and French. And we will also give German translations. So we show the objects together with photo you see here, and also the audio files. We have the digital waterfall, which actually is on language diversity. It consists of various words of water, which are falling down over several meters. And we focus on the diversity of flora and fauna. There's three major things we have to look at. It's a fragility of island diversity. It is a uniqueness which has developed out of the endemism through isolation. And we focus on the long existing ecosystem of the rainforest of Papua New Guinea. Visitors can stroll through the gallery as they want to. There is no line they have to follow. But if we will give guided tours, or if we can intend it a little bit, we would like to invite them to turn to their left, and there they will find a section on identity, which is entitled Identity Has Visible Markers. And it starts with a life-size split screen where we invited Pacific Islanders. We were impressed. We had a post on Instagram, how many replied. There were Pacific Islanders from several European countries traveled to Bremen, and some were just by accident close by and stopped by. And we invited them to talk in the split screen about their visible markers of identity, which could be tatau, could be clothing, could be the hairdo. And what we did is, maybe you know that from childhood, was quite popular in my childhood to have this game where you always put the lower, the middle, and the upper part of bodies together in a different way and mixed it. So that's what we have done here digitally. And in the consequence, we have a focus on fashion, but also on sports, on rugby and on surfing, on tattooing, and on navigation and seafaring. Just one example here, as a German museum trying to attract a younger audience, it was for us absolutely clear that a strong focus of this section should be on tattooing. Tattoos have become very, very popular in Germany. So we thought this is to attract a younger audience, to raise curiosity, to get an intro into Pacific Islander cultures. Let's do that. And of course, there are these typical tattooing tools from our collection. There are historical and modern photos, there are explanations of the patterns, but we also wanted to make something a little bit different. And there came Anja Nialunga Schmidt. She came up with the idea that she would like to dance her tattoos. So what you see here is just a still out of a video where she is dancing to a traditional Samoan tattoo song. And at the same time, she is explaining the meaning of her tattoos to herself. The next section you enter then is on colonialism. This is a very important section of that exhibition, and has to be, because the history of German colonialism is not very well known in Germany. Just for very few years now that it is part of the school curriculum. So most grown-ups don't know anything about German colonialism in the Pacific. They maybe know a little bit about Africa, but they are not even able to just to name the former colonies, or not to know anything about it. So for us, it was clear we have to have a strong focus on explaining the history of the German colonialism. Of course, there had to be a focus on the provenance of our colonial collections, then on the destruction and resilience of Pacific cultures, and then also important, and that's why we gave the headline, Creating the Future Without Forgetting the Past. We wanted also to focus on our cooperations, and with that, in doing so, on the question on the future of museums like ours. So the scope is threefold. One is responsibility. I would say about 95% of the collection from the Pacific is stemming from the colonial period. And it is important that we create transparency about its origins. Second is that we would like to do something in regard to decolonizing collection language, with giving back the indigenous names to the objects as far as we were able to. And the third is to give access, online access, to our provenance results. So on every text plate, you find a QR code. And if you go on that, you enter our digital database. And with that, always the latest info we have on the provenance. We are on the way of digitizing our whole collection, and we, with Oceania, are almost finished. The cooperations, no surprise now to you, will definitely be on the collaboration with the Hokote Moriori Trust, but also with a cooperation we have with New Ireland. We also have artistic contributions by Hinemoana Baker and Emelicha Kileng, who is now working as a curator here at Te Papa, but also by Natasha Ratuba, who created a Marci for us, Fijian Tapa, which I have the pleasure to get tomorrow and to take with me to Bremen. And what we want to show also with this part of the exhibition, that repatriation is not the end, but the beginning of something new. This is a lesson we learned from the repatriations we had in the past years. The fourth section of this exhibition is on the sustainable usage of resources, and that's coming because of this trade and commerce economic form which we have in our museum. It is on fishing and on coconuts and coconut products. We labeled it land and sea are inseparable. And to stress that and to give a better idea to the visitors what that means, we did it in two ways. One is we purchased a ghost net turtle by Elliot Konutu, who also in a video explains why this ghost net turtle is really a symbol of connecting land and sea. And we did it in a bit metaphysical way by putting up a Haraiga mask on the blue floor, like standing on the sea, and by having the fish flying in the air. So just playing around with the idea that land and sea are inseparable. The last and also very important section on this exhibition is on climate change, entitled Climate Change Knows No Borders. It has a focus on coral reefs and on the life of turtles, but also on oceanic resistance and on the Talanoa dialogue. We had lengthy discussions about this in our museum. We believe that nowadays we don't have to explain anymore what climate change is. We don't have to explain what it is caused by. We even don't have to explain what we should do to fight it. So what actually are we going to do here? So we highlight the coral reef, the consequences for the coral reefs, for the turtles, but then we turn to what Pacific Islanders do by themselves in fighting climate change. But also we wanted to touch again the emotions by the visitors through a video poem, but also invite them to sit in an installation which is inspired by the Fijian Talanoa dialogue, to invite them to rest, to reflect, and to discuss. And if we, as curators of this exhibition, would have a wish for free, then it would be that we managed with this exhibition to bring this astonishing beauty of the Pacific Islands with positive emotions to our visitors, to give them the idea that it's not fighting climate change, it's not just about restrictions, things which are suddenly forbidden, things you are not allowed to do anymore, but the other way around, that it can be a question, I think, of joy and even be fun to change our life habits and to do with that in a joyful manner something to keep the Pacific Islands from further drowning. So far to the Blue Continent, islands in the Pacific. As museum work is, this exhibition is not yet open and we are already thinking about the next one. It has, for the moment, the title Fire and Ice, and we plan to open it at the end of 2027. Still searching for funding. This exhibition will focus on climate change again, because this is, from our point of view, as a museum as we are, the most important topic for all humanity we can focus on. And we will look again to the Pacific, broaden our view. We will take into the focus the Arctic, the subarctic, Antarctic, and Australia, so the whole circum-Pacific region, because this is the part of the world where really the geostrategic hotspots of climate change are located, where people are most affected, but also they are the one who causes the climate change. This is a region of the world where most of the tipping points in the Earth are lying. So actually, this is a place where it will be decided upon the future of humanity. So that's why we decided this will be our next permanent exhibition. And spread the word, we are hiring. At the moment is open the head of the Department of Cultural Anthropology, which will be specializing on Oceania. And we are looking for a new co-curator, a cultural anthropologist, art historian or similar, but focused, specialized on indigenous art, because we really, with this exhibition Fire and Ice, would like to look to people's reaction to climate change. How does it change our life in the countrysides, in the big cities? How are we going to adapt to what is happening to us, and which in part won't be changeable anymore? And of course, we also will look to what it makes to animals and the plants. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Vibeke Arndt, for your very informative presentation, and also the detail about your collections at the moment and your future exhibitions. I know when I was in Germany, outside of, within New Zealand, I'm a Māori, but when I'm in other parts of the world, people don't necessarily see me as a Māori, they see me as a Pacific person. So I'm quite comfortable for that, because I know where my ancestors come from. So in Europe, I'm part of the Pacific peoples, or Pacifica. I haven't heard the word Pacific Islander for a long time. So that's a word change that happened in this country probably about 20 years ago. Yeah. I'm just going to introduce our next two speakers, and then I'll give more details about their presentation. So a dear colleague of ours is Hongia Lele Dr. Safua Akili Amama, Head of New Zealand Histories and Pacific Cultures. Safua is the Head of New Zealand History and Pacific Cultures at Te Papa Museum. Formerly, she was the Director of the Centre for Samoan Studies at the National University of Samoa. Currently, Safua is the President of the Pacific History Association. She is a historian and has research interests in cultural heritage, gender, governance, health, and migration. Co-presenting with Safua is Dr. Anaka Song, is a Loans and Acquisitions Advisor and former Research Assistant for the Pacific Peoples and Cultures at the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa. Dr. Anaka recently completed her PhD in Art History at Victoria University of Wellington, Te Herenga Waka, and has curated the exhibition Then and There, Here and Now, Portraits of Samoa 2023. Together with Dr. Safua Akili Ama, she is a team member of the Samoan Multiplicities Project, which works in collaboration with the Ludwig Maximilians Universität in Munich, Germany. So the third presentation by both Safua and Anaka. The title is Shared Histories, Connected Futures. The description of the presentation is Exploring Entangled Relationships Between Aotearoa New Zealand, Germany and Samoa. The presentation shares about current and recent research projects that examine these interconnected relationships through various platforms. I invite you both to the platform.
Maybe while we're waiting, we could maybe stand up and we could do the Samoan commercial break that we usually do. Jackie's here and can help along. So we do the mili, 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 just rubbing our hands there. And patia is one clap and lua pati is two claps. So patia, patia, lua pati, hey, hey, ho, hey, hey, oh, okay. We can do it at the end and see if we're awake. Well, yeah, would also like to add a very warm welcome. Kia ora koutou katoa, malo, soifua, malange ma, guten Abend, and warm Pacific greetings. At this time, we'd also like to acknowledge the recent passing of Kingi Tuheitia Pōtatau Te Whero the Seventh. And I'd like to read just a couple of Samoan proverbs. Aue ua mariri utoa ua maumaua upenga o le taua. The Samoan proverb references the loss of a battle when a great leader has fallen. Tau ina ia pa'u se toa ai tūlai se toa, ia liai fo'i le foti ai tutō lona suli. This proverb acknowledges that when a great leader falls, another leader will rise in their place. Manuia lau whainga malanga, moe mai rā, moe mai rā. Well, it's lovely to see Professor Vivke again. I have very warm memories of 2018 when I attended that international session on the guidelines on dealing with collections from colonial contexts. So lovely to hear about the projects that have been born from that, and I think really warms my heart, and great to see colleagues involved. Well, our presentation shares some insights into projects connected with Germany, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Pacific histories. Recently, Annika and I hosted a symposium in July with the support of the Wellington Goethe Institute, and this focused on sharing these shared histories. So we provide some brief insights into a couple of those Te Papa collaborations, and hope that look forward to sharing the dialogue with all our presenters later on. So I'll hand over to Annika to start us off.
Thank you, Safua, and thank you everyone for being here today. So we'll just have a look at the first of these projects that we've been working on. So this is the Samoan Multiplicities Experiences of Samoaners project, which is, as mentioned before, a collaborative project between Te Papa, Tongareva, and the Ludwig Maximilian Universität in Germany. And as you can see as well, it was also funded by the European Research Council. And this project is actually just one of many projects that were part of a kind of bigger parent project called Indigeneities in the 21st Century. Now, looking at the title of the project, this notion of Samoan multiplicities for us emerged out of the current political split of contemporary Samoa into American Samoa and independent or Western Samoa, as well as Samoas of the past, German Samoa and the New Zealand administration of Samoa. But additionally, there are also today's large diasporic communities in countries like New Zealand, Australia, Hawaii, America, and Europe. Samoa is therefore spatially and temporally distributed, but despite all these kind of past and present transformations, the sense of Samoaners has always remained intact, and they kind of formed the foundation of the research. We have already seen some very productive outputs and further collaboration opportunities through this project, such as our research trip to Samoa in 2022. And you can see a little photo from a blog of the website here, where we also went to the National University of Samoa and some other cultural institutions, as well as the symposium that Safua just mentioned as well. And this has already led to some ongoing discussions around how Te Papa can honor our recently signed MOU with the Museum of Samoa. And we're currently exploring opportunities like an exhibition there, as well as an online webinar series. We also have a couple of publications coming up, including a journal article and 2 book chapters that together cover the content of the kind of 3 main topics that we decided to focus on in this project. And these topics are considering the ways in which Samoaners has been represented in, firstly, exhibitions, secondly, online, and then thirdly, in our collections here at Te Papa. So this first topic, the Samoa on Display, is essentially an exhibition history of Samoa. And in New Zealand specifically, exhibitions offers an opportunity to address our, historic events of our past and expose those relationships between our countries, as well as more recent moments of collaboration and shared identity. And the photo on the bottom here is from one such exhibitions. It's called Entangled Islands, an exhibition that was held at Auckland War Memorial Museum in 2014. The curators explained that it was to celebrate the centenary of World War I by highlighting New Zealand's invasion of German-occupied Samoa, which is, the first big act of New Zealand in World War I. But just as it was mentioned by Professor Wittke, that in Germany, a lot of people don't know about the kind of colonial history of Germany. In New Zealand, it was very similar, that most New Zealanders didn't know about this happening at all, and that New Zealand went to Samoa at this time. The exhibition itself was presented through the perspectives of German, New Zealand, and Samoan individuals, but was also very community focused and included many interviews and profiles of contemporary voices. And just as the legacy of New Zealand's administration of Samoa continues to this day, the exhibition itself also lives on because it was gifted to the Museum of Samoa, where it is still being housed now. The book you see next to it here represents the second topic of our project, which looked at Samoa Online. And this considered the importance of digitization in community engagement and analyzed how exactly users were interacting with Te Papa's collections online, what sort of items are popular, and what were people saying about them. And this book is a Whālupenga, or genealogical book from Samoa, and was in fact one of the most popular objects on Te Papa's collections online almost every year since 2016. I think once it was surpassed by the colossal squid, but I think that was to be expected maybe. It was fully digitized because of this high demand. It received a dedicated blog post with lots of engagement and comments. Most of the views came from within New Zealand and Samoa, but Germany was also among the top 10 countries from which users were accessing the book, the only European country, actually. And it seems that the main reason users were looking at it was to learn about their own genealogy and to prepare themselves for taking on a chiefly title as a Matai here in New Zealand or elsewhere. So the digital presence of this book, becomes really essential in making this knowledge of chiefly titles available outside of Samoa. The third or final topic of the Samoan Multiplicities project looked at how Te Papa's very cross-disciplinary Samoan collections can actually act also as a guide to contemporary sustainability and community practices, as well as environmental changes in Samoa. And to demonstrate this, I was introducing you to the national bird of Samoa, called the manomea. And I'll just show you some of the collection items we have here at Te Papa and how it relates to the bird, and in turn, how that in turn teaches us about Samoanness. So the manomea, or tooth-billed pigeon, is the closest living relative of the dodo and is itself dangerously close to extinction. It's estimated that less than 200 birds remain in the wild today. Yet while it may be difficult to find a manomea in the forests, it can very easily be found in the history, language, and culture of Samoa, as well as in our collections. So the egg you see in the middle here is the only example of a manomea egg that we are aware of in a museum collection, which makes it very essential for researchers trying to ensure the manomea's survival by learning more about it. Supposedly, they only lay one egg a year, quite low to the ground, so they're very vulnerable to predators like cats and rats, which means that finding an egg like this in the wild is near impossible. The dried plant specimen is of the maota tree, which is an indigenous tree in Samoa that has very big yellow fruits, which only the manomea really is able to eat because of its large size and its strong toothed beak, which basically means that the survival of the plant is directly reliant on the survival of the bird as well. The postage stamp is from a series from 1952 that showed depictions of village life, showing activities like making siapo, harvesting cacao, fishing. And the manomea was actually the only animal really represented in this series, which again emphasizes how important it was for daily life. You know, just as much part of the cultural heritage as anything man-made was. The Ie Tonga you see at the bottom, or Ie Samoa, which we've learned is a new term for it. Like the one you see here, are the most precious type of mat in Samoa, and also act as a reminder to us here that in the past, locals used to hunt and eat manomea, and then subsequently use its red feathers to decorate the fringe of these mats, which does not happen anymore. These have been replaced with mostly dyed chicken feathers, I've heard. And finally, the contemporary artwork you see at the top is by a New Zealand-born Samoan artist, Leafa Wilson, or aka Olga Krause, and it addresses the German Samoan colonial legacy through bird imagery and text. She combines the German word Bundeswehr, so the armed forces, with the English colloquial word bunga, which is like a racist term for people of color. And then the Bundesadler, or the German eagle, sits very prominently in the center, but underneath it, you see the word manomea written boldly in red with a little stylized head. It's small, but maybe you can see it. So the manomea becomes part of a politically charged discourse on national identity in this work here. But the manomea is also a good example to show how the shared histories of New Zealand, Aotearoa, Samoa, and Germany can actually work together for one cause and present new opportunities for relationship building. One thing we discovered at the archives in Samoa was that the German administration had already established strict hunting rules in Samoa and recognizing the need to protect the manomea and other birds. So the first document you see on the far left is from 1911, where the imperial governor Schulz issued an executive order in German, English, and Samoan that prohibited the capturing and killing of manomea. There was a Birds Protection Commission that was established, launching awareness campaigns via different media like the Samoanische Zeitung, the newspaper, and they also conducted surveys with landholders to gain insights into bird populations and habitats. In more recent times, a variety of institutions have become involved in supporting Samoa's conservation efforts. The New Zealand government financially supported the Save the Manomea campaign from 2019, along with other New Zealand partners such as Auckland Zoo, the Department of Conservation, and Wellington Chocolate Factory, which created this beautiful limited edition chocolate bar with the manomea on it. Auckland-based artists Charles and Janine Williams were also invited to paint large-scale murals of the bird, starting here with the building of the New Zealand High Commission in Apia. And then they continued to produce more murals on buses, schools, and museums with local artists. And finally, the book you see underneath there, Mose and the Manomea, was published by the Auckland publisher Little Island Press. And the royalties from the sales of this book have been donated to the Auckland Zoo Conservation Fund to support the protection of the manomea and other Samoan species. So these collaborative efforts, really highlight the growing international commitment to preserving Samoa's unique biodiversity through the protection of the manomea, and demonstrate how our country's entangled relationships can really work towards a better future. So now I'll pass back to Songyalele to briefly talk about some of the other projects that Te Papa has been involved with.
Thanks, Annika. So this is a collaboration with the Museum Natur und Mensch in Freiburg. We were approached in 2021 by colleague Heike Gerlach who was in the museum's ethnology division. And they wanted some help with contextualizing the collection of historical photographs from Samoa, which had been gifted to their museum in 2019 from a private collection. So there were about 76 glass negatives, which belonged to Adolf Vollbrand, mainly from the turn of the 20th century. So with oversight by my colleagues, Dr. Sean Mellon, Senior Curator Pacific Cultures, and Ethel McCready, who's Curator of Photography, and myself, we were able to recruit Charlie Klinger as the research assistant for this project. Charlie has a master's in design research and practice and is of Samoan and German heritage. So really added a lot of value to the project, enabling us to access, like with Annika as well, accessing some of the German language literature as well as the Samoan and English. So through her work, she was able to find out who the collector was. Adolf, before his career as a sort of a GP, he worked for a shipping company, Blom and Voss, in Hamburg. So he reached Samoa in the 1880s and was a founding member of the German school there in Apia. So that's how he sort of found his way to Samoa and came back to Germany and provided different talks and presentations of his time there. So Charlie was able to really conceptualize some key themes on these collections around people, places, and colonial legacies. For us, some of the images were familiar, but some were also new. And so through Charlie's work, she was able to identify the woman there in the photo, Josephine or Saucier Yandel, who was the sister-in-law of Alfred Tattersall, was a long-time photographer based in Samoa from New Zealand. I guess for Charlie, some of the challenges were around identifying some of the individuals, at times trying to determine the sort of social status of some of these individuals. And some portraits, you know, wearing garments and clothing that may not always be sort of the reality of who they were. So that was quite interesting for her to work through. Also the work of the photographers, namely Thomas Sandrew, John Davis, and Alfred Tattersall, you know, very similar in some of their work and oftentimes using the same studio. But she was really, really keen to use the language because that was a really key aspect of the project, was to source some of the literature that we weren't able to, but also making sure that reaching out to other institutions, reaching out to other collections, that was really a large part of Charlie's work as well, which really built up our network. So with that research now complete, the outcome is to produce an online album for the museum, which will be translated into German, French, English, and Samoan. So we really saw that as a valuable project demonstrating that ongoing need to collaborate, as Professor has mentioned earlier, and partner with institutions to be able to tell those different stories from different perspectives. The last project was also an important one where I worked with Dr. Christine Winter, who's a historian her work connects the Pacific with Australasia and German-speaking Europe, and research assistant Courtney Powell, a history master's student. With some funding from the Friends of Te Papa, we were able to examine again some of those German Pacific connections, looking at some of those relationships, how these were fostered, developed, and how these have changed. And really, we looked at the course of 100-year period, so from around 1850 up to the post-Second World War period, 1950. As Annika has mentioned, also the entangled relationships also feature across these different collections from Pacific cultures, collected archives, photography, and also philatelic. So there we have some of the objects there, and through Courtney's work, we sort of looked at three key themes, sort of that pre-colonial period, the German colonization period, but also New Zealand administration. And we found in the collected archives at Te Papa, the scrapbook here, which you can see on your left. That was a scrapbook which belonged to William Morehouse, Colonel Morehouse, who was part of the influenza epidemic inquiry. So we hold that scrapbook, which we discovered had some amazing images, itineraries, the people that they met, the work of the group there to unravel and unpack what happened during the influenza period. We also have a stamp there, which is one of the oldest objects for the project, and it represents King Malietoa Laupepa. This stamp was produced in New Zealand by the government printer, and probably in 1896 it was printed. 2 years later, Malietoa Laupepa passes away, and there's a change to the governance of Samoa at that time when it splits between American Samoa and German Samoa. So part of these objects which we selected and which we felt represented the entanglement of both colonial and commercial, of both personal as well, and also the fact that it covered a range of historical moments over that 100-year period. So themes like conflict and trade, labor, unequal partnerships and resistance, these were all part of, some of those key moments and relationships told through material culture. So in closing, we hope our presentations, although brief, have provided some insights in how we're trying to work with mea sina, taonga objects, collections to understand the connected histories, but the shared histories as well through various platforms, languages, mediums, and partnerships. So, whawhai te lava. All right, thanks everyone.
So we have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. I think we'll take them from the floor. So Annika and Vibka, if you can come back. And Safua is going to take the questions.
Yes. Right. Well, kia ora everyone. We're open to maybe a couple of questions. And Colin has a mic. What, Rachel? Oh, just here, Colin, thanks.
Kia ora, just wanted to thank you all for your time today and your amazing talks. They're really interesting. This is a nice moment for me in my working life to hear the work of colleagues. My question is for Dr. Arndt. Really interested in your development of permanent gallery spaces. And I wondered how you worked with audiences in Bremen to find those points of connection between the oceanic content and the relevance to the lives of the communities where you're placed.
Unluckily, there is almost no Pacific community in Bremen. to work with. So that's why in this case, we really reached out to the Pacific, started a digital dialogue with several people, invited them to come to Bremen to work with us. But this is probably also a reason why the German colonial period in the Pacific is so forgotten, because you don't see them in the streets. We have people from different African countries in Bremen. So the African community is quite visible, but nobody, almost nobody from the Pacific.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I was very, I mean, I work with the Moriori, Okitiki Moriori Trust and preserving the Raku Mumuri. And you did mention quite a few Mihiki. I was wondering whether there was any Raku Mumuri taken to Germany?
Any what?
Raku Mumuri, the dendroglyphs?
Not as far as I know. We have the stone and bone tools. And as far as I know for the moment, that's it. But I invite you to look online. The collection is online on Museum Digital, but also on the Digital Pacifica platform.
Thank you so much.
Jackie?
Oh, kia ora, Salofa. Just a question for the professor. I heard in the development of your exhibitions this notion that the new galleries would be positive, almost fun, and you know, which is great. But I'm just curious about how do you make colonization positive and repatriation positive? You know, how do you get that balance, and why is that the emphasis, given the context of Germany in World War II, I suppose, and what else is happening in your city and elsewhere? I'm just curious about the wider context about the positive climate.
You picked your finger into the wound because, of course, this isn't positive, can't be positive. Repatriation, yes. That's what we really also like to bring to our visitors, that what is said, it's not the end, it's the beginning of something new. It's an opening a new chapter. So it has something positive. It's not of emptying the museum and then looking at empty shelves or what some people think. So, but to say, well, it's a starting point for cooperation and for new interpretation. So that is a positive thing. We discussed intensely that, of course, there were a lot of cruelties, and we have to talk about it. You have to understand what the German colonial administration did to people, what people who moved to the Pacific did to the people here in the Pacific. This needs to be understood, that needs to be explained. But I give the example of the artwork Hinemoana Baker and Emilicia Killing created, which brought the dark part of colonialism turned into something of beauty. Their belt and the heitiki are into a dialogue with each other. They created a set of poems, and one is called "You Need Our Eyes to See Us," where the belt and the heitiki, I mean, Emilicia is in the room and she probably could recite that, so hopefully I don't make any mistakes, and I'm not citing the quote, but I just tell a bit of the story. They are in a dialogue about, do you feel the cold here? What happened that you are here? You have so red eyes. What bloody things did you see? And we added in the discussion things to it, which I'm very much looking forward to the reaction of the visitors, that the question is, what do these objects remind you of? And Hinemoana Baker said, well, heitiki, you have to touch to have to feel the stone. So we were searching, that was also the idea, having a stone from the shores of Bremen, which can in a certain way resemble the feeling of having the hand of a jade. And Emilice was the question, what do you think, what do you feel if you see the belt? And she said, it's a smell. And I asked, what kind of smell? And she said, well, the smell of fish and the smell of flowers and the smell of baby powder. And so we created two smelling, or we are on the way to creating two smelling stations. One with ilang ilang, one with a fish, and one with some baby powder. And we discussed together, well, if the reaction will be as it is in the audience here, you start a little bit of giggling. Said, is that a problem when it's such a dark topic? And the answer was no, it's not. So I think instead of doing a very didactic, hammer-like, oh, the cruelty was, blah, 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 it is in a way something which touches your emotions. It is a place where you're invited to sit down and to listen to the poems, to watch at the same time the objects, the originals and the showcase. And if you want, you can touch a stone and you can smell what Emilice thinks, what this belt has a resonance in her. And so this is what I mean. It's not making something which was dark and cruel into something positive, but still to try to get to the people by touching them emotionally through beauty. And I think this, for my personal thinking, these poems, they were in an online presentation. This was really a part of the digital part of the exhibition. And when I listened to these poems and saw these objects, I thought, hey, we have to find a way to bring this into the museum space, into the physical space. And I'm very happy that this is a way of doing it.
This is a question to Safwa, I guess, most, but maybe also other people in the room. I totally agree with when Professor Ahn says that the German colonial history isn't well known. I know for myself, it never really figured in my school education. And so this exhibition is an important first step, but what would you want Germany to do? And how would you want Germany to tackle this topic? We just had this discussion, don't turn it into a light topic, but make it accessible. So what would be your guidance for us?
That's a big one, Winnie. I think what we saw today is a great start. And I think the work that Bremen's doing and have done, co-curating, we're trying to do that too around our work here. As Annika's mentioned, the Museum of Samoa have requested some support around an exhibition because they also feel that Samoa's history in Samoa is not known. So that's something we're working on with our colleagues there, thinking through, what those key moments might be that they'd like to focus on. A lot of the issues, is that a lot of the taonga or measina sits outside of Samoa, for example. So connections and partnerships with the museum in Freiburg, Bremen and other institutions allow us to actually understand what is in existence, and also working through language. So language, I think, for us has been major. So important connections with the Goethe on that. I've been fortunate to have Annika on the project. She's been able to help with the German side of things. So yeah, just trying to set up projects that will extend the reach and then try and collaborate with some of those communities. I mean, a lot of what we deal with, like even here in Aotearoa, they don't really know much about the German connection either, apart from the First World War or the Second World War. So some of it is around bringing those different histories to light, because it's not just the German problems. Samoa's having its own. So there are different contexts in which people are living and working. So I think these are the steps that we take. They're very incremental, but they take a lot of change. So just visiting in 2018, the German Museum Association, working on the guidelines, that was really eye-opening to meet Professor Arndt there and hear about their museum, its focus on trade. And I thought, you know, these are the things we need to do, is make those connections. I see anyone has a question for Te Here Kiki?
I can ask my own question. Well, one of the interesting things I did find when I was at a fellowship at Göttingen University in late 2022 is that I was with interns from Africa, and also one of our colleagues from the Pacific, Associate Professor Tarisi Vunidilo. And so some of the discussions we did have was a lot of the African countries have been decolonized. And so, which put me in a very awkward situation because I'm a Māori from Aotearoa, and we actually haven't been through the decolonization process. And we are starting to have conversations around co-governance, which actually is a very difficult time for our country. And so while I can celebrate with our other Pacific nations, Pacifica people around their own mana motuhake or their sovereignty, that is something that I as a Māori and our people don't have. And so that's a conversation that we have to have. And so that stemmed from being actually in Germany around realizing those conversations that we need to have around decolonization. Yep, so kia ora.
Actually, I have a question to you. I have a question because looking to the list Te Papa has online on the past repatriations, this is astonishing. And I'm wondering, do you expect that this is coming soon to an end? Are you able to repatriate all ancestral remains back to Aotearoa?
When our program first started in 2003, formally we became the formal mandated program for the New Zealand government, Karanga Aotearoa Repatriation Program. The program, the early researchers back then, so Susan Thorpe was one of those early researchers, and they thought that there would be about 200 to 300 Māori and Moriori ancestral remains overseas. What's transpired over the time is that we understand about 1,200 were traded overseas, and we've repatriated 850 so far. But as we know, if you work in a museum, new collections get found and parts of the collections that haven't been seen for a long time. So in France, we've just found out there's 100 Māori and Moriori ancestors there. And so we still don't know what's in Spain or Portugal and parts of Russia as well. So I anticipate there's still over 450 ancestors to come home, but it might increase over the years. And so it's still probably about another 20 years.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm not 21 anymore. Yeah, so I'll just finish with a karakia and acknowledge the passing of Kingi Tuheitia. Nō reira, e te Kingi Tuheitia, moi mai rā i te wako te rangi Māori, moi mai rā i te aroha o ngā iwi o te motu. Nō reira, āpiti hono te tātai hono, te hunga mate ki te hunga mate, āpiti hono te tātai hono, tātai te hunga ora, tēnā koutou, kia whakairia te tapu ki runga, kia wāte ai te ara, kia turu ki whakataha ai, kia turu ki whakataha ai, haumi e hui e, tāi ki e. Kia ora rā. Chrissy, can you tell me when my 15, well, I'm going to speak for 10 minutes. Can you tell me when I've got maybe 2 minutes left? Just give me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm introducing myself, and then I'll introduce you, and then I'll introduce Safua and Anaka. Tēnā ra koutou. E mihi kawana kia koutou e whakarongo mai, e mātakitiki mai ana I tēnei kōrero I tēnei wā, nō reira tēnā koutou. Our dear colleagues and friends that are watching online this presentation, Te Papa is very happy to present the connections that we have with the Übersee Museum in Germany and the undertakings that we have done to connect both Oceania taonga artifacts and also Koiwi Tangata and Koiwi Chakat, Māori and Māori ancestral remains with their communities of origin. So tēnā ra koutou, my name is Te Hereke Kia Herewini. I'm the head of repatriation and I'm happy to present today. And so one of the first things I do want to do is acknowledge the passing of King Etu Heitia and also a very dear kuia of the